Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. Today we actually have a torrent of really fantastic news for the health of the game. Mythic Plus is going to be seeing some large improvements, Artifact Power is also seeing improvements, and a really giant topic of concern has actually been addressed by Blizzard. I'm going to start off with what I think most people have been worried about though, and that is the Artifact Power grind in patch 7.2. Now, as many people noticed, the numbers in the PTR, they were flat out crazy. It was looking like it would be 4 times more of a grind than the grind from rank 34 to 54. Pretty insane. Now, I didn't really cover this sort of new Paragon grind because I noticed that Blizzard had been quiet in the issue, and the data just seemed honestly too ludicrous to be believable in a way. The good news is that they have came out and said that those numbers were on the PTR as temp values, and the PTR build next week will have more finalized values. Community Manager Lore's post went on to say that the current PTR data suggested that the effort required in the new patch would be greater than that of 7.0, and he said that that was not the case. I'm glad to hear it's not, that isn't the case, but we're not out of the woods yet. The correct values could turn out to be too much. I think that the grind should be less than the 34 to 54 grind by quite a significant amount. As you might know, I don't really find that type of gameplay to be particularly compelling. I enjoyed unlocking the initial traits, but then the Paragon ones just seemed to exist for the sake of having the game last longer on paper. Similar to the Paragon levels of Diablo 3, but the key difference is that in D3 you're racing against yourself and your past performance, whereas in World of Warcraft it's a team game, most of the time, at least for the raiders it is, and up to a 14.5% damage increase that's mainly based on time spent grinding outside of the core raid content isn't really that fitting. I do think that a system like that is fine, but I don't think it should be so tied to player power. Perhaps convenience stuff, cosmetics, something like that would be a better way to go for that long-term progression, maybe a bit similar to a beefed-up version of the PvP prestige system that currently exists in the game. Now, there's actually some more fantastic news on the Mythic Plus front. As you may well know, I'm a really big fan of Mythic Plus, broadly speaking. However, it certainly was not without its problems. The amount of AP that you would get was the same for every dungeon, which seems okay until you realize that Maw of Souls takes like 6 to 7 minutes, Trial of Valor takes, 25, maybe 35. This meant that groups would always prefer doing a shorter dungeon because it was often like multiple times more efficient to do so. So if you're a player that got a Trial of Valor key, like good luck getting rid of it. Patch 7.2 is trying to fix this problem. Artifact Power rewards from Mythic Plus dungeons are going to scale dependent on the length of the dungeon. So in terms of Artifact Power per hour, Maw of Souls and Trial of Valor should be roughly equal. So I think this will greatly help boost the gameplay variety for the people who do Mythic Plus boost groups quite a lot of the time, and it'll also ensure that every keystone is useful and viable and valuable to everyone who gets one. They're also implementing a really nice feature with AP and Mythic Plus that actually should help alleviate a bit of the grind and also be quite alt-friendly. So the weekly chest is going to contain a large amount of artifact power, and that will be scaled off the highest level Mythic Plus dungeon that you've cleared in that week. Now, this accomplishes a few things. First, players who just clear 4 or 5 mythic dungeons and maybe work their way up to a plus 10, those players will get a lot more artifact power than they would have previously because of this big bonus at the end of the week, on top of the new chest, well, I suppose at the start of the next week. Anyway, hopefully this means that people feel less of a need to grind lots of lower level Mythic Plus dungeons. So I think this, in addition to the gear chest, does help to push people towards doing the more high level engaging content, rather than just grinding out stuff that they overgear for the sake of AP efficiency. I especially like how this overall does increase the time efficiency of playing challenging content casually. I don't have time to raid really anymore due to the WoW add-on project and the other game development project that I'm doing, but I do have time for Mythic Plus. So I think that a lot of people in a similar situation there might, you might have previously felt just a bit useless thinking that you had to grind Maw of Souls all week, but, you know that you didn't have the time to actually do that. Well, now it seems like there's a really efficient option for people who just want to go in, spend a few hours, and kind of call it quits there. Now, there's also some more Mythic Plus improvements. First, overflowing has been removed, and a number of other affixes have been balanced. They've also added in some new ones, which is quite nice, and they've also done adjustments to a few bosses and trash mobs. Finally, there are new keystone variants of the Cathedral of Eternal Night, which is the new dungeon in 7.2, which I should hopefully check out soon enough in a video. And there's also a keystone version of Upper and Lower Karazhan. I think this, along with those AP changes, should help to give, I think, some much needed variety in the gameplay of the Mythic Plus system. Now, speaking of artifact power, they've also just implemented a hotfix which makes Nighthold raid bosses drop AP. I think this is really good, and I think the initial implementation of boss AP was a mistake. It forced people who were already committing 3 nights a week, or maybe even more than that, to raiding, to then put even more time into grinding out Mythic Plus for their artifact weapon. A lot of people say that I'm too raid focused on this topic, and they said that with the last video on the channel. It's worth reminding everyone that I've barely raided in Legion due to the time that it takes to edit videos and the other projects that I'm working on. But I think even from my casual perspective, some of these raid concerns do seem to be quite apparent, and it's feedback that I do get from people quite a lot of the time. I think changing up these systems is going to be a net win for everyone involved, especially with those Mythic Plus changes, which seem to be good for the hardcore players, and also good for the casual players who just want to do a few of them a week. They've also implemented a hotfix that increases the drop rate of corrupted essences. I think that'll help out alts quite a bit. And finally, on the topic of legendary items, obviously, there's still something that I do find quite concerning, but Laura did mention there will be a lot more information on how that system is going to work in 7.2 with next week's PTR build. So overall, I think this is a fantastic set of changes that pretty much benefits everyone, actually. A lot of the outrage over the AP balancing stuff, it just could have been avoided if Blizzard had have posted something to this effect when the data mining was actually going to happen. What happens is they push out PTR builds, so they know when players are going to get their hands on bits of information. A quick blue post to alleviate most of those fears would have really helped and prevented a lot of worry. Instead, they ended up being silent on the topic. They let it grow out of hand over a period of time. I think they could have just been a lot more proactive about this, and often it does seem like Blizzard are felt, they're left reacting to a controversy rather than actually saying, by the way, guys, this isn't what we're going with. More information later, but don't worry, which, in this case, I think would have saved them a lot of time, and it also would have saved players a lot of time, because a lot of people were, mobilizing to, oppose this, and it turns out that might actually not have been needed, and it was a bit of a waste of time for everyone involved. So really, I do wish the Blizzard would up their game on a few of those elements of communication. That said, they have made some great improvements over the last few weeks. And yeah, just frankly, putting out numbers which Blizzard know aren't going to be final or even representative of what's going on, putting those out without any explanation, that's just asking for trouble. Even if you disagree that, you think that people shouldn't get outraged over things like this, ultimately, it's kind of predictable that some will, and it's easy to prevent that from happening. So that's my few cents on the communication topic, but overall, really fantastic news, and I'm pretty keen to hear what you've got to say about this. Now, there was another topic where a whole bunch of pretty high-end progression guilds have actually stepped down from the progression race, Midwinter and From Scratch, and there's another one, but I forget their name, and a lot of people were talking about the grind of doing PvE content and, the mob souls farming and all that. I wonder with some of these changes, or just in general, if you are a raider in that situation, what are your thoughts? Of course, I can't really speak from personal experience, so I'd be dead keen to know. But anyway, that's it for the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.